Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Szafraniec coming to you live for the Week 4 Waivers show on RotoViz Radio. I was supposed to be joined by Blair, but I think Daddy Duty comes first. So we are just going to rock solo for the time being and talk about some waivers. Currently, I just put out the Week 4 waiver wire article today, and some of the biggest players mentioned. The top of the list has got to be Juwan Jennings. We had some big spike week this week from him, putting up the single best performance of any player so far this season. So, I mean, 46.5 points. This is not really what we were expecting. If we were going to see that sort of performance from anyone on the 49ers, it definitely would have been Brandon Ayuk. Hey, Blair.
Hey, sorry. I made it.
Well, it's all good, man. Daddy duty comes first, man.
Right. Unfortunately. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got today?
We got a whole bunch of good stuff. So I'd like to welcome in Blair, managing editor of RotoViz.com, author of The Wrong Read, and I would like to mention author also of the historical context articles that have been coming out, which have quickly become one of my favorite articles on the whole entire site, diving into all the rookie goodness that the NFL has to offer. So I was actually just right before we jumped on here, I was reading the latest article you just put up today about the performance of the rookie wide receivers so far. So pretty awesome, man. Pretty awesome. How's it going?
Going well. Yeah, those are fun ones to write. Always fun to dive pretty deep into the screener and get reminded of all these old names that used to be on my fantasy teams and probably disappointed me, but that's not going to happen in 2024 because these guys are legit, right?
Yeah. We saw some Peter Warricks, some Roy Williamses. So it was a good blast from the past. But
multiple different Mike Williamses.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I feel like 2024 will be a little better in the long run when we look back in 20 years. So I was just kind of jumping into the spike week guys from this week, and I started talking about Juwan Jennings and then Cole Kmet as well. I mean, those were pretty much the two biggest spike weeks that we saw this week. I mean, Juwan and Jennings, 46.5 PPR points was the highest single game total so far this season by any player, passing Kamara from last week. But I'd say, and that right now he's currently the wide receiver 4 overall, wide receiver 2 in FPOE. And it's not like he came out of nowhere. I was also saying that if we were to expect somebody to score 46.5 PPR points on the 49ers last week, we would have all thought it was Ayuk. But alas, here we are with Juwan Jennings. In week 1, he had 11.4 PPR points without a touchdown. So, like, it's not like he hasn't done anything this year. But I was just kind of, the biggest thing is, like, I don't think he can keep this up. Obviously, he's not going to finish wide receiver 4, but while Debo continues to be out, I was kind of just wondering what you think we might be able to expect from him over the next, I don't know if it'll be 2 weeks or so until Debo comes back. Not really sure. Haven't really heard any clarity on Debo's injury, but how are you feeling about Juwan Jennings in the short term?
Yeah, it's a good question. He's definitely, you would think, still behind Ayuk for sure in the target kind of lineup. I think we also, Kittle was doubtful for a lot of the week. Like, they were thinking he might play, so I assume we would have him back next week. So coming back in week 4 with a little bit more target competition, hopefully with Ayuk getting more work. I mean, maybe it's just the case that Ayuk was pulling so much defensive attention that Jennings was open a lot. I actually haven't watched this game yet. But if Jennings is kind of proving that he's someone defenses have to pay attention to, then that can work in the opposite way and give Ayuk some more opportunities. So I do think, going forward, you'd still expect him to be kind of the third option in the receiving game as long as Debo is out. So, you said he had 11 points in week 1. Maybe that's what you would project him for as like a baseline score as long as Debo's out. Maybe even that might be a little bit optimistic, but obviously, this isn't even the first kind of explosive game he's had. So, he can obviously score a ton of points in this offense.
Yeah, and I say up until this week, his only regular season wide receiver 1 performance was all the way back in 2021. But I mean, he's shown flashes here and there.
Yeah.
And the 49ers can develop talent. That was one of the big points that I wrote in the Monday Review article was like, hey, like we need to stop doubting some of these role players that step up in these offenses, and whether it be their talent or scheme. I mean, both are generally part of the equation. But like I said, we shouldn't really be doubting these guys as much as maybe we do. And then the other big spike week performance that kind of came out of nowhere from a really low-owned guy was Cole Kmet. He looked to be the biggest loser of the Allen and Odunze editions. And it's just kind of like fair to wonder, can we expect Kmet to continue to produce if Caleb Williams isn't thrown 50 times a game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's kind of a question mark for all of the Chicago guys who played pretty well. I just wrote up Odunze as being kind of a generational talent. Not quite, but he's, of course, the one that I'm still most skeptical about. And then the other, Keenan Allen being out obviously opens up targets for Kmet and for everyone in this offense. So depends what we see from him, whether he's, going to be coming back soon and going to be putting up, going to be demanding targets. I mean, at the same time, like Kmet is someone who we know he has this kind of upside. He's finished as, I think 2 years ago, he was the tight end 3. Does that sound right?
So he was in 2022, he was the PPR tight end 9, tight end 3 in FPOE. And then last season, he was the PPR, tight end 8, and then tight end 5 in FPOE. So he's got a good track record.
So he's been efficient. I must have been mixing up the FPOE and PPR. But yeah, in any case, he's obviously a talented player, and it's kind of surprising that he's owned that he's still available in so many leagues. Like I would have thought he would be on rosters. I was surprised to see that Neil Dutton also had him in his tight end streaming article, because I would have just assumed he's on more than 50% of ESPN teams or something. So, maybe I just needed to check my ownership percentages or assumptions or something. But I think he's definitely a good pickup in a season when tight end scoring is really down across the board, because he's the sort of player who, if there were injuries, or maybe even there don't have to be injuries, if the Chicago's offense is going to be thrown a lot, is going to be putting up points, then he's the sort of player who could put up good scores on a week-to-week basis, I think.
Yeah, and that was even my thoughts going in, is like, I understand where the low ownership comes from, because especially like in a home league, it was a little hard to add him, just knowing that he's going to get squeezed from all directions. And even to start the season off in like week 1, Everett had a 61% snap share, and Kmet only had 41. But since then it's flipped, where Kmet had 77% last week. In week 2, and then Everett had 36%. Then week 3, Kmet jumped to 81%, and Everett went to 33. So like, I always thought, like, I mean, I've given up on Everett, and I was kind of upset when they drafted him, because his athleticism is generally tantalizing enough that somebody will throw him in, and then he just disappoint. So, but yeah, I think going forward. So right now, Komet's currently the tight end 33, but he's tight end 77 in FPOE. So he's taken a big drop from the past 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think he's going to have those spike weeks here and there, and like there's a lot worse players that you could go for on the waiver wire.
Right.
So I also headlined the waiver wire article by saying this is our last chance to possibly pick up 2 potential league winning upside type running backs. So that shouldn't really come as a surprise to anybody who reads the site. Braylon Allen and Bucky Irving. I was like, why is Braylon Allen still available in leagues? That's just really, I mean, he was my top waiver pickup at running back last week. And then, but even still this week, I mean, he's currently, I think, 36% owned on ESPN. Let me look real quick. Yeah, 28% owned on ESPN, 36% on Yahoo. So, I mean, what's the deal? Is it just people think that Breece Hall is just gonna squeeze him out, or I don't really get it.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I'm sure, probably the main thing you're worried about is that even though Allen's looked good, he's still clearly the number 2 back on this offense. Right through 3 games, he's been out-touched, I want to say, 65 total opportunities for Hall, 27 for Allen. But, I mean, that includes week 1. In week 3, they were a lot closer, 21 for Hall, 14 for Allen. So you're looking at a situation in which it's not even like a 63-33 split, which is kind of what we speculated last week, if I recall. We were kind of trying to handicap this and put it there. But Allen in week 3 even ate into Hall's workload a little bit more. So now, it's kind of a 3-2 split, which, I mean, he should definitely be rostered in pretty much every league, I think, especially because if Hall gets hurt, Allen is like the most valuable running back in the league.
Yeah. And I was kind of, when I was doing the deep dive for the waiver article today, so over the last 2 weeks, Braylon Allen is the running back 15. And even if we just include the week 1 where he only had 2.7 PPR points, he's the RB 26. So he's just right outside of starting in 2 QB or in 2 running back leagues. And even so, every week so far this year, Hall either has 21 or 22 opportunities. But even Braylon Allen getting more opportunities hasn't affected him whatsoever. So, I mean, both of these guys can coexist on the same offense. So I just don't really get it. I think people just think that it's either one or the other when in fact, it's both. And I mean, you've brought it up before, like the Kamara versus Mark, or with Mark Ingram. It's not even versus, like that the old Saints backfield.
Right.
Like, and that's like, I think is a perfect comparison for how to view this backfield. And I think if anybody gets squeezed, it's unfortunately going to be maybe the wide receivers or Garrett Wilson or, like hopefully not Garrett Wilson. Hopefully it's like Allen Lazard or Malachi Corley or Tyler Conklin. But at the same time, I think maybe the Jets are setting this up to have these guys be the driving force of that offense.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is that, it wasn't exactly this way in New Orleans where Kamara was getting all the receiving work and Ingram was getting all the rushing work. It kind of seemed that way, but Ingram still got a lot of targets. But that in itself is important to remember, but it's also important to realize that Allen is getting some targets too. Like, he's not being squeezed out of the high value touches just because Breece Hall is there. So he has some standalone value and some huge contingent value.
Yeah. And then swinging down to our guy in Tampa Bay, Bucky Irving. So how long do we really think it's going to be before he's the lead back and really pushes Rachaad White maybe to like an ancillary receiving role? Because I still feel like Rachaad White will probably still like stay in for receiving work, third down. But I mean, Bucky is pretty obviously like the better rusher of the two up to this point.
Yeah, that's, I think, been so clear to anyone paying attention. But yeah, like White still does have the lead in targets, almost more than double what Bucky has, and a big lead in receiving yards. I think you, yeah, I don't think White is completely phased out of this offense, even though Irving in college was a good receiver. And, you know, you could probably make an argument that he's at least as good as White as a receiver as well, and should just take over the backfield entirely. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. But still,
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting some targets. If he kind of forces the coach's hand to put him in at the goal line and give him most of the carries, then that's certainly good enough.
Yeah. And I say, can't really, I mean, obviously yards per carry isn't our favorite stat to cite, but 6.2 for Bucky to 2.1 for Rachaad White is kind of, it's enough for us to kind of go off of and say, like, hey, look at this guy. And they say Bucky's got about half the targets so far of Rachaad White.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, as long as he continues to show that he's the better back of the two, I wouldn't be surprised to see that grow a little more.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, yards per carry isn't our favorite stat to cite because it's not necessarily that reliable, and yet we still keep coming back to it and looking at it as something that's trying to tell us a little bit about running back talent. And I mean, if we're doing that, I'm thinking the coaches are doing that too. So it's predictive in that way.
Yeah. So then finally, the belle of the QB ball, it seems lately, because everybody wants to talk about him, but not really. So we're talking Sam Darnold. If only somebody could have seen something like this coming before. I don't want to be pat myself on the back, but when looking at teams that could kind of overperform in comparison, like to the Buccaneers and Seahawks of the last 2 years, the Vikings seemed like a team that could kind of jump out and do that. So currently QB5 overall. Like, how long can he?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, can he keep this up, and then for how long?
I mean, probably not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been good despite not having Jordan Addison there, despite TJ Hawkinson still being out. Like, maybe he just has to keep some percentage of this going until they get a fully healthy receiving core, and then this will be like the highest powered offense in football. But yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen, I don't know if we've necessarily seen Darnold do this before, but you definitely have cases where veterans who kind of bounce around the league look good for a few games, and except in the case of like Geno Smith, usually it doesn't hang on. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but definitely impressive the way he's played.
Yeah, and he did pick up.
He's definitely worth adding in, like,
oh yeah,
I mean, even in non-superflex leagues.
Yeah, I actually had him and Geno Smith as the top two waiver wire ads for players that are owned in less than 50% of Yahoo and ESPN. So I think he could finish as a low end QB1. They say even he's currently averaging 19.9 or is 19.3 PPR points per game, and that would have for a 17 game season pace, that's 328 points, which would have been right between Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes last year, and that was right around QB8, I want to say. So I mean, obviously we see him take a little bit of regression, but I mean, I think that there's something to be said for scheme. I mean, even look at like what Malik Willis did last week, or let's say it seems like that scheme was simplified, but still, like, for a good coach that knows how to use their players properly, like, I don't want to say talent isn't as necessary, but at the same time, they can make up for a lot of the deficiencies in a player's game if they're smart enough to use them properly.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So going to the comments. So we have Wolfpack777 says, in need of running back help, how would you prioritize Justice Hill, Roshan Johnson, Emmanuel Wilson, Gibson, Miles Sanders, or Patterson? And a lot of these guys were featured today in the article. So currently, like Emmanuel Wilson is, out of all of them, Emmanuel Wilson and Antonio Gibson were the two that I ranked the highest. And just by name value, I think Wilson takes a little bit of a knock, but actually, he's been playing really, really well the last few games. Marshawn Lloyd just hit IR, and really Wilson is the only person right behind Jacobs right now. So even an injury to Jacobs could open up a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, he hasn't really needed it.
Yeah.
Like he led the team in PPR points last week, 16.5 to Jacobs' 5.8. And plus, I mean, he had that big long touchdown reception. And then at the same time, too, Antonio Gibson has that week one performance where Roger Stevenson sticks in our head. But actually, Antonio Gibson's been better than him in the last two games. So on a lot less snaps.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, Emmanuel Wilson is the name that jumped out to me, not only because he had that kind of explosive play, but like you said, kind of he's really the only guy there now. I mean, I guess I do think Justice Hill is kind of interesting just because the way Baltimore has been using him early in the game on clear passing situations. He's been efficient with his touches, like he's getting carries even with Derrick Henry there. Like he's the clear number 2 in Baltimore. If Henry gets hurt, I think most of that work goes to him. And even without a Henry injury, you can't say he has the more valuable role because they're giving so many carries to Henry, especially near the goal line. But certainly Hill is getting a lot of those running back targets. So I still think is pretty interesting. Those are the names that jump out to me.
And the one guy
Gibson, like you said, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did want to talk about, even though I had them in a tier below, is I think Roshan Johnson is really, really interesting going forward. Because, like, spoiler alert, this might be a little hot takey, but I did list DeAndre Swift as a potential cut in today's waiver wire article because he literally has just been. I mean, he has not performed this week or this year. He has the name recognition. He has the big contract. But averaging like 5 points a week isn't really going to do it for you. So currently, Swift is averaging 6.5 PPR points per game, according to the Monday Review tool. But as of last week, and it's fine that like after Roshan Johnson's mysterious absence this preseason, it seemed like it was like a toe injury that the team just didn't disclose. But I mean, he came out and he was the top back on the team this week, scoring 10.2 PPR points, second in snap share to Swift.
Right.
And I mean, how are you viewing the Chicago backfield, or if it's even worth viewing going forward? That's kind of like my biggest thing is, I mean, that offense has just been a mess. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely interesting that when Roshan came back, then Khalil Herbert was basically out of the game plan. Like he only had 9 snaps in week 3. And Johnson took, he took most of those from Herbert, but he took more away from Swift than Herbert had been. And, Travis Homer didn't even get a snap in week 3. So yeah, it does seem like they're willing to give Roshan more work than they wanted to give Herbert, and maybe even it'll be a competition between Johnson and Swift. And if Johnson is outplaying him, then yeah, I think, kind of a hot hand. approach in Chicago, he probably ends up getting more snaps. So that's an interesting call. I like that.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of extra bias in it because I was literally hammering Roshan Johnson in the last rounds of best ball drafts. So like, I want to see him emerge. So I guess there's a little extra bias in there. So I can't say that's totally objective, that call, but at the same time, I mean, I never like even kind of what we've seen from Swift, the Lions pretty much gave him up for peanuts, and then the Eagles didn't really care all that much to keep him this year either. And really it seems like the Bears aren't always the smartest with their money. So even the big signing of him really didn't seem to like move the needle maybe as much as it should. So I don't know. I'm excited. I think Roshan's definitely a pretty good sleeper target, but
yeah.
I mean,
you list or the question asked about Patterson. I assume that's Cordero Patterson. I guess I missed whether Jalen Warren got hurt, but Patterson, it seems like, has just basically moved ahead of him, unless there was an injury that I didn't see.
I'm not sure myself.
I'm kind of curious. Okay, maybe not moved ahead of him. They both had 23 snaps in week 3 to Harris's 40. But I mean, if Warren, who's not been playing well, is not even ahead of Patterson now, I don't know. Number one, is Patterson at all interesting to you? Number two, is Warren droppable?
Oof. That one hurts right there. It stings. For the people that don't want to drop Swift because of the sunk cost, that's where I'm at with Jalen Warren. But I mean, Arthur Smith strikes again. That's all I got to say.
That's right.
So I don't know. I mean, like literally, my mind would say that Warren might be droppable, but my heart says no.
Yeah.
So like that's just I think he just is. I don't know. That's I don't know. I'm gonna have to take some time and really cry over that one after we go off camera, because I hadn't really thought about that to this point. So thank you for ruining the evening and possibly my week, Blair. So
he didn't get out snapped by Patterson, but he did get outplayed.
Yeah.
Knee injury. Yeah.
Yeah, Diego jumped
That's
in.
what I was thinking. There might have been an injury because I thought I saw something come across my face, but couldn't remember.
Yeah. So Diego also posts that he traded for McBride last week and is planning for his absence this week. Are you more excited about Hunter Henry, Colby Parkinson, or Daddy Conklin?
I guess Conklin, man. I mean,
yeah,
he was just, it seemed like Rodgers' favorite target. Obviously, against different opponents that aren't focusing so much at taking Wilson out of the game, that's going to look a lot different. So I don't necessarily think, maybe we never even see Conklin have this many targets in a game again this year. But he's earned Rodgers' trust, it seems, and if he's on the field near the goal line, I think that's where something. Parkinson runs a lot of routes and doesn't necessarily get the targets or the high value targets. I think there's also a question about how effective this offense can continue to be without Kupp or Nakua. So I probably am a little more skeptical about that. And kind of the same thing with Henry. So my lean is toward Conklin. What are you thinking?
Well, I will defer to our tight end guru, Neil Dutton, in his article today, because as I was reading that, I personally didn't put Conklin in. I saw his name, and I don't know. I just never been a big Conklin fan, but Neil and I are literally like racing against each other to like put these articles out every day. So after I got done with the waiver article, I jumped in and read his article, and really Conklin's PPR per game, he is better than I thought, because I mean since what is this? From the beginning of 2023 until week 3 of this year, he's been a tight end 110% of the time, but he's been a tight end 50% of the time. So like of those guys, it's between like Hunter Henry or Conklin.
Yeah.
I think Hunter Henry, obviously we saw in week 2 the type of spike weeks he can have. There's not really a lot of competition in that offense. So I think if you're like floor play, probably Conklin and Hunter Henry doesn't offer much less floor, I do believe, than Conklin. So I mean, I might say Henry, but at the same time, I'll defer to Neil on that one because that's his thing. So I will defer to him on that.
Neil did have Henry in his week 2 article, obviously, or his week 3 article rather. Looking forward to week 3. So trailing the big performances, but still, that's kind of what you have to do when at tight end. When somebody shows they're able to put up points, you kind of say, okay, that's interesting. I guess I need to have a little bit of that. But yeah, maybe you could make an argument that Henry has more upside and a higher ceiling than Conklin with the less target competition. So I could definitely see that.
Yeah. And what may be our final question for the day? We're trying to get out of here before 10 Eastern. Ronaldo says, would you drop Akers for Jordan Addison? My running backs are the Jets, Jordan Mason, KW3. Is
that Kyron Williams?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. And then Ford. And do you want to take this one first or do you want me to? Because I'm pretty sure we'll have the same answer.
I know you are an Akers fan, in a way. At least you've been trying to get me to pick up Akers, or we did pick up Akers in our FFPC team, and kind of worked out. I think the person I have lowest on my list of all these guys would be Ford. But it's close.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Sorry for making you overthink that one, but yeah, drop Akers for Addison. I figured it would just be it was an emphatic yes when I thought about it.
Definitely drop one of these guys. I think it's a question of whether the drop should be Akers or Ford, but probably I would drop Akers.
Yeah, I think Ford. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen with Chubb, so I mean, for now, Ford has a better role. Like Foreman didn't really do much in the Browns' offense on Sunday, so I think Ford. I mean, and as soon as Mixon comes back, Akers is relegated to part-time. I don't really know how long Mixon is supposed to be out. I haven't seen any updates recently, but I mean the fact that he came back in to that game that he hurt his ankle in that Monday night last week makes me think that maybe he misses this week again, but maybe not much after that. And maybe Pierce comes back too because he was dropped after that. He picked up like a knee injury, I think, during the week. Or maybe it was after week 1. I'm not really sure when it happened, but I mean, there's always the chance that if Pierce is healthy, he was active over Akers in week 1. So maybe, that the team just likes him better.
Yeah.
And one more. Would you drop Keon for Mooney?
Well, Keon, I mean, even when the Bills score 47 points, their offense still looks pretty weird to me, where they're not necessarily, highlighting the players I think they should be. I don't. Maybe it's because they were up by so much that Keon didn't play that much. Like he's running behind Mac Hollins and Valdez-Scantling in terms of routes and opportunities. Maybe the fact that it was a blowout has something to do with that, but I'm definitely worried about Coleman's opportunity. And, would I drop him for Mooney? Maybe.
Yeah, let's say up until at least after week 2, I know that Coleman was leading the Bills in snap share.
Yeah.
But in the article, that newsroom article I posted about the Bills after week 2 is I still think Shakir even it solidified it even more after their game this week. But like Shakir is the wide receiver to own in that. But I think the secondary piece is Coleman. I mean, just with the draft capital stuff, they're going to keep giving him opportunities. And watching that Atlanta game, I mean, it's just kind of sad when you see Darnell Mooney just getting hit with target after target when Pitt was there. So even like Mooney is featured in the waiver article today, and so he's currently on the Falcons, second on the Falcons in PPR points to Drake London's snap percentage, but at the same time, Mooney's running 96%, or he's on the field 96% of the snaps, and targets, and he has 18 targets to London's 19. So it just seems like he's clicked with Cousins early on, and I mean it's frustrating, honestly.
And the coaching staff,
yeah. So, but all overall, I mean I don't know. Atlanta just does not look good in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's just I don't know. I have a hard time buying into an ancillary piece in that offense.
That's the thing. It's you're trying to choose between a guy who's not getting a lot of opportunity and maybe won't be getting a lot for a while in an offense that's really good versus a guy who's getting a lot of opportunity that might be kind of empty because the offense isn't that good. So, I mean, it's a tough call. I think, as a site, we were kind of skeptical of Coleman in a lot of ways. He was very young when he came in, but he just wasn't very good at Florida State, right? So I think there were a lot of red flags on his profile. He was probably overdrafted a little bit by the Bills, I want to say. Maybe he takes a little while to catch on in the league. Maybe year one isn't when he's going to produce. If you need the production now, if you need a floor, then I guess Mooney makes sense because he is getting the targets. He is on the field. There's always touchdown potential there. For like long-term upside, I prefer Coleman, but I don't even feel that strong about it.
Yeah, it's more of like if you need somebody to throw in the flex next week due to injuries, or I don't know, bye weeks are going to be coming up before we know it too. So like he's probably the one to own for that. But as far as like if you have enough people to fill out your starting lineup, I mean, I would stick with Coleman.
Yeah.
So just a heads up to everyone. So we're going to be trying to start this show a little bit earlier, probably around 9:15-ish, 9:20-ish, depending on, schedules and family life and whatnot. So going forward, we'll be trying to start this a little bit earlier so we can get some more questions and still finish by around 10 p.m. Eastern time. So tune back in next week. We'll be right back here looking to answer as many questions as we could possibly jam into as many minutes as we're allotted before 10 p.m. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and thanks for submitting your waiver questions. Be sure to continue to check out the site. Man, we got every day there's awesome articles coming out. We got Neil Dutton's tight end streamers came out today. Ross Durham's defense and special team streamers are coming out. We got Dave's passing matchups. Dave does the GLSP stuff. Sean's got the Zero RB universe. Blair's doing wrong read, and he's in the historical context series that I was kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show. So basically, we got everything you need over at the site. Just check in every day because there's bound to be something up there that's some juicy nuggets of amazing information that'll help you win your league this year. Is there anything else you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, you nailed it. Yeah, I mean, you can still get a discount by using the code RVRadio 2024 or going to the podcast homepage, or I think the newsletter is still going to have some codes in it. If you are subscribed to that, you can get a code to get a discount on a RotoViz subscription. And still very useful at this point in the season with all the waiver decisions you have to make. Kevin is killing it on the waiver article, and we're going to be back here next week answering more questions. So stay tuned.
All right, everybody. Until next week, take care, and best of luck in week 4. We'll see you guys next week.